Hi folks, and thanks for tuning in. It's a lazy Sunday afternoon, so I figured I'd make good on my promise and go ahead and post video on the TT33 Tokarev. Now, I have mine here. This is a Russian TT33, stamped 1945. I don't know if you can see this. I know the lighting here isn't the best, but yeah, she's a 1945. This is again Russian made. Problem with these, a common complaint is, oh yeah, I guess I'll show you, it's not loaded, there you go, nothing in there, is when the slide is fully cocked back, the mag won't drop out. I will show you how to fix this problem. It's a very simple fix, not an issue. I've got actually 3 mags here, and I've done a minor adjustment to it that has allowed this to work. And I'll even load these mags up with some dummy rounds and show you she cycles, the hammer comes down, nothing like that, and or everything like that, and the mag doesn't fall out. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and show you where the problem is. We're going to start by disassembling the weapon. Now, I've already showed you this is cleared. I mean, never fool around with a loaded gun, especially in your home. So what I like to do when I take this down is I like to use a magazine and just the butt plate end there to push back your retainer clip there, which will allow the takedown pin to come out. So I'm just going to push back on this nice and smooth, and there we go, she comes out. I like to pull back on the hammer because it just makes it easier to move the slide around, and then you're just going to push on this pin, and as you can see on the other side there, this little takedown pin starts to come out, and there comes the assembly. So that's your slide stop and takedown pin assembly right there. Once that's done, I like to grab the gun by the front here, put my fingers along that spring so it doesn't pop out. I take this takedown pin assembly, and you've got your spring follower button right there. We're just going to push down on that just enough to allow us to turn this front bushing, and you're going to want to keep your thumb over top of that spring button as you turn this bushing, or else it's going to pop out on you. So there we go. Out comes the bushing. Out comes the follower spring. Pull this out, slide it out. There she is. And now, if you push forward this barrel stop lug, you'll be able to take your barrel right out of your slide. So now, if you want, you can take the firing pin out. Firing pin is held in. Let's see if I can't get a good, there you go. See that? This is called the split hair pin or a butterfly pin, and it can be knocked out with a regular punch or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just take my screwdriver case, because it's got a nice little pit in it to do this in, and set the slide down with that split hair side up. That's what you're going to want to punch on. And get a hammer and a punch again. Now, what I find works easiest on these is just pick one side of that hair and go ahead and knock on it till it moves back. And once it moves back, you're in the clear. And she can be knocked all the way out. And there goes the pin. Now the firing pin's going to shoot right out the back there. There's our firing pin with the resetter spring. If you're firing corrosive ammunitions, every once in a while you're going to want to service this, especially if you're going to put it away for quite some time. Don't allow that stuff to rust. Here's our split hair pin or our butterfly pin, and as you can see, that's just what it looks like. It's easier just to knock on one of the lips to start it moving out. Now to put this back in, As you can see, this has a divot, this firing pin. That divot has to line up with that hole, or else you're not going to be able to get that pin back in. So, how to do this, the easiest way to put this back in is to put the weapon back together and have the hammer rest upon the firing pin to keep it in. So why don't I set this aside for now, and I will show you fully how to put it back together later. So we'll set those aside. You don't want to lose those pieces. Next, we're going to take our trigger group out. Let's let that hammer down. Pull that trigger group out. There's our trigger group. And next what we're going to do is take our grips off. So on your hook side here, you're going to see a lever right at the bottom there. You can just faintly see it. We're going to go ahead and slide that back towards the rear of the frame. So I'm going to grab my handy dandy screwdriver, and I'm going to use just a narrow bit here so I can get in, and I'm going to slide that back towards the rear of the frame, and she'll just fall right out. And all you're doing is adjusting this lever, which keeps these flaps on either side of the frame, so you're just pulling that back so they ride inside the frame so that falls out. Next, we're going to take the other one off. As you can see, we've got lips here again, only now you're just going to push down on one of those. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in, pull it down. Our flaps have moved to the side. She takes right down. Next, we need to take our trigger out, and I'll show you where the problem is. So here's our trigger. Our trigger is one solid piece, but to get the trigger out, we're going to have to get the mag catch out right here. Again, we've got another one of those butterfly pins. So I'm going to set it down, and I'm going to hammer my punch just on one side of that butterfly pin to get it started moving, and then you can just hammer right in the center. So there she goes, and out comes a butterfly pin. This is the actual mag catch piece. This is the piece that actually keeps the magazine in. Here's the butterfly pin with the magazine drop button and the spring. Don't lose those. Now we can go ahead and drop our trigger out. Our trigger comes right out just like that. Now the issue with these for your magazine drop is this actual spring in the back here. Now you can take that spring out, but you got to bugger around with it quite a bit, and it's not worth all the work to do it. What I ended up doing is this spring used to sit out here. Let's see if I can't get you. Yeah, it would sit out here past the frame, pressing against the magazine, and that trigger just rides against the spring and pushes the spring back. And the trigger group, let's see if I can't show you this. Your trigger group, which is riding along the spring, presses upon your hammer group here, and when it hits that, the hammer is released. So we don't want to do anything to adjust the height of that spring, anything like that. The issue is we don't want it sticking out past that frame. You just want it a hair behind it. So what I did is I took a handy dandy punch like this, stuck it behind the spring against the frame, and just pushed back on that spring so I could slightly bend it to the position I want it to be in, so that when that spring is set, it's just slightly out of the way of the frame, so it's not rubbing up against the rear of that magazine when it's trying to drop. That's your issue. You've got that spring, and don't forget you've got about a 1/16 of an inch of steel that is also being pushed up against that. So you've got that 1/16 of an inch. You want to make sure you've got a little bit of room back there so that it's rubbing against the rear of the magazine slightly, but not enough to counteract your slide stop magazine push down mechanism here. Okay, so again, that spring, that's the culprit Don't overbend it. Do it slight amounts until you get it right. You don't want to have to try to bend this the other way. It's not that difficult to do, but it is a pain, and you want to bugger around with this as little as possible. So with that, showing you how that's done, I will go ahead and put the pistol back together. I'm going to take the trigger, slides just back into the frame like this, and she's back in place. Now we're going to go ahead and put the magazine catch back in, and our pin should just slide right in there. Going to go ahead and put that butterfly pin back in. You might have to fiddle around with it a little bit, but it'll get in there. There we go. And she's back in. Now before you go ahead and put it all the way back together, try a little test. Put it in, push the button, see if it works. You may even want to put your trigger group in. You may even want to put your trigger group in here. Pull the hammer back, because that loads it slightly and pushes up against that trigger. And just make sure that she's still clear before you go through all the work of putting it back together. If that checks out, chances are you've fixed the problem. So, I'm going to go ahead and put the grips back on now. This one goes here, and I mean, these can only fit in one way, but that taper right here goes to the upper end of the grip. I'm going to go ahead and pull those lips to the side so that stays in there. Stick the other one on. There we go. Both grips are back in place now. So now our next step, we're going to go ahead and put the slide back on. So first things first, we put the barrel back into the slide. You pull that lug nut back up, so that's sticking out. Take your spring, insert it up here, and you want that, you can see down here you've got that rounded part, you want that riding along the bottom of the barrel. We're going to go ahead and I like to use my hand like that so that spring doesn't pop out. I'm going to go ahead and push that spring follower down. Put the bushing on. Next, I'm going to drop our trigger group in. I find this is easiest to do with the hammer depressed. So we're going to pull that back, and then we're just going to slide our slide back on. Nice and easy. Next step will be to put the takedown lever and the slide catch assembly back in. So we'll push that in. She's gone all the way through. We're going to reattach that takedown clip. Again, I'm just going to use the rear of a magazine and slide it forward over top of that pin. There we go. And let the hammer down. Now this is how we're going to put the firing pin back in with that hammer. We want that hammer depressing on that firing pin. So I'm going to pull that hammer down. Take this firing pin. Again, I talked to you earlier in that video about having that divot right side up. That's what we want. And we're just going to let that hammer do the work for us. You may have to push it in with a punch or something to let that hammer down all the way. There we go. The hammer's down all the way, and you can see, I can see through that crystal clear because that divot is lined up, which means we're ready to go ahead and push the split hair pin or the butterfly pin, whichever vernacular you prefer, back through there. So I'm going to set the gun down here, with a nice little divot behind it, because that's how I like to work. And we'll get that pin started. And there she goes. Now you can see that pin is on its way in. Go ahead and just hammer, go ahead and just punch it the rest of the way through. Pin is back in. Our firing pin is now in place. And if we go ahead and put a magazine in there, pull the slide back, drops out just the way we want it to. Now, if you're a little afraid to play around with this, or you don't believe it's the spring, why don't you go ahead and do an experiment on it. With your slide pulled back, put your magazine in, press down on that clip, and just depress your trigger a little bit. It should fall out because that spring is pushing a little too hard against the rear of that mag. You can do that to drop your magazine if you prefer not to bugger around with that spring, but this is a fairly easy fix. I'm going to go ahead and load up one of these magazines and the chamber with a dummy round. So these are 8-round mags, as you know. I'm going to go ahead and just... These dummy rounds I got at Cabela's. I think I paid like $9 for 10 of them. Not a bad price. That's actually where I got my dummy rounds for my SKS as well. So if you're looking for a place to get those, Cabela's is a great place to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and load one of these into the chamber. Drop that out and put an 8th one in just so we can test this. Just so we can test the spring tension of the magazine. We don't want that magazine pushing itself out at all, since we've been playing with that spring. Now that magazine is in there solid. I let the hammer down. There's nothing that's disturbing that mag to come out. So we're going to go ahead and cycle it. And she works like a charm. Anyway, that's my quick video on this. As far as review goes, I actually like this pistol. It fires well. Some issues for buyers in the States. I know in the States you have to have this imported, I believe. They have to be modified to have a safety added. These do not have a built-in safety except for a half-cock position. In Canada, that's not law. Mine does not have a safety on it, except for that half-cock. And as far as carrying this weapon chambered, you don't have any stop lever bar or anything like that for a safety mechanism, so it's not something I would recommend carrying it chambered. It might not be such a wise decision if that half-cock fails on you. There just aren't enough safety features on the pistol for me to feel comfortable doing something like that. Not that you can carry weapons in Canada anyway. But as for carrying it cocked, I would say that would definitely take some points away from using this as a defensive carry weapon. I've talked to people who live in the States who are perfectly comfortable with carrying one of these chambered with the half-cock safety drawn. I don't know if I would be doing that. As for itself, the recoil on it is pretty heavy. It's a pretty heavy charged round. It kicks heavier than a 9mm, I feel. It's about a 40 cal kick, I find. But pretty smooth action, fairly accurate for when it was made. You know, I can get at about 30 yards, I can get a grouping of about 4 inches. So take it or leave it. It's probably not the greatest, but it's pretty good. For what I paid for it, I paid $160 for this, and $30 extra per mag. I would say for the price of it and the cheap surplus ammunition you can get, I would say it's worth the purchase. 9mm ammunition up here for 1,000 rounds is about 300 and some odd dollars. 2,280 rounds of ammunition for this is $350. So you're cutting your ammunition cost in half if you're firing firing surplus. Other than that, I find this to be a pretty good pistol. I like it, and until next time, keep your powder dry and have fun shooting. Be safe.